I have a love-hate relationship with editing. I kind of enjoy it, but at the same time, I hate it.
Podcast editing. I mean, come on. Do I need to edit? How much editing is really even necessary? What programs should I use? How much do I need to learn? Should I hire somebody to edit my podcast for me? Should I just figure out how to go live and do my podcast as a performance? There is so much to consider and worry about when it comes to podcast editing. It can really make or break our shows. We are, in fact, providing an experience and entertaining and educating our audience. So we want to make sure that we deliver our audio content to them in a way that's intentional and also sounds the best that it can. With that being said, sometimes we can edit too much. Sometimes people like to hear the raw, unedited world that we live in and that we bring them into. So in this video, with the help of some really cool podcasters, we're gonna talk about all things editing, and I'm gonna help to clear the way for you so that you really know what type of editing is necessary for your show. There is a lot to learn from these real and amazing podcasters producing their shows every week, how they edit them, and the different methods that they use. So let's get right into their heads. I wanna hear about their experience. But before we do, two really quick things. At the end of this video, I'm gonna make sure to include some actionable tips. I'm gonna tell you about different audio editing software or DAW that you can use and some different solutions to kind of wrap up everything that all of these podcast editors are going to share with you in this video. And two, if it's your first time stopping by our channel, we are the Pod Sound School. I'm Studio Steve. I'm an audio engineer and a crazy podcast guy. Here on our channel, every week you'll find a ton of really fun and informative videos to help you take your online content up another notch. Okay, that's enough from me.
I kind of enjoy it, but at the same time, I hate it. I hate the fact that it's time consuming and that for every 10 minutes of audio, I can probably spend 40 minutes, or at least for every 10 minutes of audio, a minimum of 20 minutes, right? It's like at least 2x, but it can be like 4x, 5x. I don't like the time aspect. And you can kind of go down a rabbit hole cleaning up so much that it's not a good use of time, because I think you reach a point where it's not as beneficial to the listener compared to the amount of time that you've put in. Like, you're trying to find that balance. Are you cleaning it up well enough so that it's a good experience for the listener, but you haven't killed yourself because you have to keep your production sustainable. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to keep up with your production schedule. I edited my podcast for the first 100 episodes. Probably 50 would have been enough. I kept telling myself that I want to do it myself, so that for a couple of reasons. One is that I want to listen back to the show with an editor's ear so that I can try to make improvements myself. As far as my questioning and my stumbles and my ums and ahs, I wanted to hear myself, because with the feedback of having to edit out the ums and ahs, it forced me to be motivated to get better. And then two, before outsourcing, I wanted to understand what the entire process was as far as editing, cleaning up the audio, and assembling the episode, so that when I did finally outsource it to someone, I could explain and I knew what I wanted.
No, I don't edit my own. I think there's an avenue for it. I think if someone has the time, which is oftentimes the answer to a lot of things, I think it can be self-done. But my preference for my own show, I hired someone to help me with an intro. They do an intro on it, an outro. I also have a bumper that they help me with. And then I also did the editing part, have someone do the editing. And then I even now am at the point where I do the notes part too. I actually outsource it. She has a really cool layout of notes that I like. And what I find, anytime you're hiring someone, and I'm sorry I'm getting off a little tangent here, but the beauty that I like about using external sources, if you have the budget for it, is everybody's mind is so unique, right? And so when I'm in the weeds of the show, I see it a certain way. But when my note writer comes back to me, the things she sees in the show like blow my mind. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't see, I'm sure if I sat there and studied it, I would, but for her to come back after editing my show and pull out this line that has such a cool vibe to it, it's worth the investment for me. Like it's worth the budget if you have it to have that mind. And same thing with the editor. He'll come back to me and he'll go, "Hey dude, I'd like to move this piece. Are you cool with that?" And I go, "Oh yeah, I didn't think about that. That does kind of flow a little bit better." And then it sounds seamless. So long answer. I think there's great options, and I don't think there's necessarily a right answer other than when you're balancing time and budget.
Now that I'm at the end of editing season 1, an entire season, we're talking over 10 hours of content, like 5 movies worth of a show. If I had been able to travel back in time and tell myself, like, hey, this is how much work it's going to take, I probably wouldn't have started. And I think that's important for people to know. It's a lot of work, and I don't think you should shy away from a project because it's a lot of work. You should do a podcast or an audio drama if it sounds like something that's too big to chew right now for you, because you're going to learn and grow as you do it. This stuff takes time, especially audio drama. You're going to get your chops up to where they need to be by the time you're finishing the season finale. I have leveled up so many times in sound design over the past few months, and it's been a full year of editing and like dialogue selection and sound design, and just the waves and waves and waves of work. But if you believe in your project and it's something personal and passionate to you, then of course you're going to finish it. You have to.
With editing my podcast, for the most part, like my podcast, it flows pretty naturally. Like we do very minimal edits unless there's big, large gaps or issues with sound. Sometimes we do this, and not all the time we'll have like extra sound bites, and we'll add that into the podcast. But one of the things I focus on is kind of the flow of the content. Are we pausing too long? Are we losing the audience? Like as I'm listening to the episode, I'm like, did that land well? Do we need to cut this out? Is there some sound issues that we need to kind of adjust a little bit, as much as you can? If you get junk in, you get junk out, right? So where can we improve it? So I also do some pre-work, like, okay, if I'm in a room that's echoey, let's kind of reduce that. Let's get a little, let's little sound boxes. So we try to do as much as in pre-production, so that we don't have to do a lot in post-production.
So I actually spend 2 or 3 hours to script my podcast. My podcast is basically a monologue. I do it myself, and I use Audacity. And actually, I use Anchor for streaming my podcast. And actually, Anchor by itself has a very good and very easy user interface to start editing. As of now, I use Audacity. And like I said, it's all free. I mean, you can use the free versions, and they do a very good job, if you ask me. And I know professionals in India who use Audacity for editing their podcasts. You just need to learn. You just need to have the interest to learn, because I learned it on YouTube. See, I am a doctor. I don't have technical expertise. I didn't even know what a condenser mic is 2 months ago, and I'm using it right now.
So I start with a script and then making sure I'm to the point, and that also helps me with editing because I don't have too many word issues. You know what I'm saying? I don't have too many and I'm reading. The equipment that I use is Reaper, and that has been awesome because it really simplified, because I took the class. So shout out to Steve, Studio C, for creating that. You guys should check that out. It simplified everything. And the biggest thing that simplified editing was Descript. Reading, being able to read what you're saying shortened the amount of time on top of the quick keys, but that right there was like a life hack, was being able to read it, and it did a lot of editing for me, and then I drop it back into Reaper and do all the fine-tune fun things, and I'm done. So I would say if I do script, recording just myself, and editing, I can do that in about an hour and a half, but mind you, my podcast is anywhere between 15 to 25 minutes.
I have to say, as a writer, I love editing. And I sort of think for a podcast, you have to love editing because it takes a lot of time. And I download the 2 tracks, my own voice and the person that I'm interviewing, and usually a specialist. So that's the 3rd track. I edit it all once to get rid of ums and things that kind of don't make the story work. People add all kinds of information and that may not fit with the flow of the story. And then once I have that rough edit, I use Otter AI to get a transcript. And then I go through very carefully with the transcript and the tape again to see. And actually, once you have it written, that's another really good way to have a sense of like, does this go with the story or does it not go with the story? Do I need in this story about pregnancy the trip to the dentist, or do I cut that out? So once you're reading it, I find that's another really good way to go through. And then I go through again and edit it again. And then I have a transcript and the edited piece. And each recorded story for the main story is probably like 45 minutes or an hour, which is a lot of tape. And the specialist usually is, I want to say, a half an hour or something. And sometimes it is like putting a puzzle together, right? You're cutting out stuff and adding it here and adding it there, and trying not to change the meaning, but keeping the density. And I'm constantly thinking, would I want to hear this if I were listening? Like, everybody has a verbal tick. People say, people say, and so all those have to be cleaned out because you don't really want to listen to that, is my sense.
So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that there's a lot of different methods, a lot of different approaches that people take to editing their shows, especially because there's so many different types of podcasts, whether we have guests, whether we're a solo podcast, whether we're an audio drama. It depends on the type of podcast that we have. But one thing is for certain, the longer that people edit their shows, the more they try to find tips and tricks or hacks to avoid as much editing as possible. And it's not that we don't love editing, it's just that editing takes up so much time, and we only have so much time during the week. So I thought we'd finish up this video by talking about the minimum editing technique with two really cool podcasters who have decided to live stream their podcasts.
One point I want to make too is when we were just doing the audio podcast, there was a lot of production involved in that for some reason, because we just recorded raw, and I would have to go in and put the intro in and then whatever sound bites we wanted. And for me, it's hard with audio because you can't see it. You can't scroll through it really fast and find the spot where you want to put it. You have to listen to the thing. And it was it was very time consuming. And then we started with the video stuff, and I thought, okay, I'm going to edit the intro into it, and then we're cutting in trailers, and then I was putting us into little boxes in the corner. I was like manually doing all the animated, the 4-ups and the 3-ups or whatever, and then having us slide over, and I was creating these templates, and I was doing all this work. It was taking me days to do that. But if I can recommend something to people that podcast where you've got multiple people in different places, to do something like StreamYard or something like that you're able to consolidate all your graphics, and you can click on stuff and have things pop in. You can basically edit, in real time and produce your show. And when you're done, and you just upload it.
So for me, a lot of times I stream my show. So I will live stream it, and then I'll download it from the whatever streaming provider I use, and then I'll do very minimal edits, and then I'll pop it out there. So with me live streaming as a video, then I'll just download the file, which is the video and the audio together, and then I will upload that into my host provider, which is PodPal. But I know that there are many other different ways that you can go about editing, and for me, I realized that this is the best way for me to go about it, just from a perspective of time. I used to take time, and the audio and the video would be two separate files. And then I would separately edit the audio. I would separately edit the video. Since my 4+ years of podcasting, now I've gone about it a little bit different way. Just like I told you, more so live streaming, and then more so minimal editing, to where when I live stream, I have it set up to where I bring in the intro, and then I transition, and then I bring in the outro, and then I transition. So now I just really need to cut, and then share.
So whatever type of podcast you have, we all have an audience, and we want to make their experience as good as possible, while also balancing out the amount of work that we need to put into our podcast and our content creation every single week by week. So to summarize this video, hopefully you picked up the advantages of editing and why editing can actually be a superhero for us podcasters, because it allows us to remove the mistakes. It allows us to cut the filler words that we use, the ums and uhs, out of our speech, what makes us sound more intelligible and makes our whole podcast sound more engrossing. It also saves our life sometimes because we can reorder parts of the conversation or take out a full chunk of the conversation that we probably shouldn't have gone on that little side tangent anyway. But it also does take a lot of time. Now, the other thing I hope you picked up from this video is the importance of preparation and planning. The more we prepare and the more we plan for our actual recording, then the less we will have to edit in the long run. And after you produce your show for a while, you become more natural, and hopefully you can train yourself not to say as many ums and uhs, and hopefully you can train yourself and keep yourself from going off on side tangents, and you can develop a good way to communicate with your guests and just get better at the interviewing process, or find a bunch of editing hacks so that you can save a ton of time. And finally, the DAWs, or the audio editing solutions that were discussed during this video. You heard people mention Audacity, which is a free DAW on PC or Mac. That actually isn't one that I would recommend because it does something called destructive editing. Now, there are a lot of people who edit it and a lot of professional podcasts that use Audacity, but in my opinion, as an audio engineer, I do think that there are much better solutions. Reaper is my go-to solution for independent podcasters. It's free for 60 days and then a one-time $60 after that. But after 60 days of editing your podcast, you're gonna know whether or not you're gonna continue to do it or not. And if you're just gonna be recording your audio and sending it to a podcast editor, then it doesn't really matter what DAW you're in anyway. The main thing we want out of a DAW is all of the features. We want it to be easily customizable to our needs, and we want it to be easy to learn, and we want it to be non-destructive, meaning that we're never gonna lose any of our recordings. And the other audio editing solution that you heard mentioned in this video is a favorite of mine, and it's called Descript. Descript allows you to edit your podcast like you would a Word document. I'll make sure to leave the link for Descript below so you can check it out. Descript is also compatible with Reaper. So those are my top suggestions for podcast editing and to save time with your editing workflow. What questions do you have? Did you like this video? Give it a thumbs up. I would love to answer your editing questions. I would love to help you take your editing chops to another level. And I actually do have an online course for podcasters that you also heard mentioned, and it's called Reaper for Podcasters. You can find out more information about that online course by going to podcastingsmart.com/R4P, Reaper for Podcasters. And that's it from me today. Check in next week for our awesome new video.